Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I work at a pretty demanding tech company downtown, and after long days coding and dealing with endless meetings, I saved up for years to get myself a decent hot tub. I had it installed in my backyard about 2 years ago, and it's honestly been one of my best purchases. After dealing with difficult clients and tight deadlines, there's nothing like soaking in hot water under the stars. I have this friend who I met through mutual college friends about 5 years back. She's fun to hang out with in small doses, though she has this habit of assuming everyone will just go along with whatever she decides. I've learned to set boundaries with her over the years, but apparently not clearly enough. Last month, we were grabbing coffee at this place near the mall when she started talking about how stressed she'd been at her retail job. The conversation somehow shifted to relaxation, and she mentioned how she'd never been in a hot tub before. I told her she should come over sometime when the weather's nice because it's really relaxing. She got super excited and asked about this weekend. I said sure, but asked her to text me ahead of time so I could make sure I was free. I thought that was pretty straightforward. I like having friends over, but I need advanced notice. My house isn't always guest ready, and sometimes I have work to catch up on or other plans. But apparently, she took my casual invitation as permission to plan some kind of hot tub party. 2 days later, my phone started buzzing with texts from numbers I didn't recognize. One person texted asking what they should bring for the hot tub party on Saturday, saying Karen had told them I was cool with everyone coming over. Another stranger sent a message about how excited they were to meet me and how Karen had said I had an awesome setup. I was completely confused. I had no idea who these people were or what they were talking about. I called Karen immediately. I asked her what she had told people about Saturday. She casually explained that she'd mentioned to a few friends that I had invited her over for my hot tub, and when they got excited and asked if they could come too, she figured I wouldn't mind since I seemed so chill about it. I told her that I definitely would mind because I didn't even know these people. She tried to reassure me by saying they weren't random, explaining that it was her friend from work and her boyfriend plus this girl she met at yoga class. She insisted they were all super fun. I explained that the point wasn't whether they were fun or not. They were random to me because I didn't know them at all. She seemed confused and said I was being kind of uptight about the whole thing since it was just a few people. I couldn't believe she called me uptight for not wanting strangers in my house. I reminded her that it was my house and she didn't get to decide who comes over. She complained that she'd already told them they could come, and it would be super awkward to uninvite them now. I told her that was her problem, not mine, and that she should have asked me before telling anyone they could come over. Then she had the nerve to say I was being selfish about the whole thing, adding that it wasn't like they were going to steal anything. That really got to me. I explained that this had nothing to do with trust, it was about respect. I told her you don't invite people to someone else's house without permission. She just said whatever and that she guessed she'd have to tell them. I changed my mind. I corrected her saying I didn't change my mind because I never agreed to this in the first place. She hung up on me after that. I immediately started getting texts from those unknown numbers again, but this time they weren't as friendly. One person said it was pretty lame that I was backing out according to Karen. Another message said thanks for wasting their time. I was furious. Not only had she invited people without asking, but now she was making me look like the bad guy to her friends. I screenshotted all the messages and sent them to Karen. I told her to look at what her friends were sending me and said this was exactly why she should have asked first. She responded that she'd told them I was being difficult and asked what I expected. That was the last straw. I blocked all the unknown numbers and decided Karen needed a reality check. I waited until Monday and then sent her a message. I told her I'd been thinking about what happened and that she was completely out of line. I explained that you don't invite people to someone else's house, period. I added that the fact that she then told them I was being difficult when I said no showed she didn't respect me or my boundaries at all. She didn't respond for hours, but finally wrote back saying she was just trying to have a good time and I didn't have to make such a big deal about it. I replied that it became a big deal when she made it one and that a simple question asking if she could bring a few friends would have avoided all of this. She finally said fine, she was sorry, and asked if we could just move past this. But here's where it gets interesting. I found out later through a mutual friend that Karen had actually been telling people for weeks that she had access to my hot tub whenever she wanted. She'd been bragging about having this friend with a hot tub who was totally cool with people coming over anytime. She'd basically been using me as some kind of social currency without even asking. The weekend incident wasn't a one-time thing. It was part of a pattern where she'd been promising people hot tub access like it was her own amenity to offer. When I confronted her about this, she tried to backtrack and say she was just being friendly, but I was done. I told her that until she could learn to respect basic boundaries, she wasn't welcome at my house at all. I later heard Karen had been complaining to everyone about how selfish I was, but when she tried to get sympathy, most people sided with me. Apparently, normal people understand that you don't invite strangers to someone else's house. I'm a divorced dad who remarried a wonderful woman from Puerto Rico. She came with 2 kids of her own, and together we've built a pretty good life. My daughter from my first marriage has always been a bit dramatic, but I love her and have always tried to support her decisions, even when they seemed questionable. I work in construction management and have done well for myself over the years. Not rich by any means, but comfortable enough to help my kids when they need it. I believe in being there for family, which is probably why I got myself into this mess in the first place. Last year, my daughter came to me with exciting news. She was getting married to her boyfriend of 3 years. I was thrilled for her and immediately told her I wanted to help with the wedding expenses. Following family tradition, I wrote her a check for $4,500 to help with the venue payment. She was over the moon and thanked me repeatedly. For months, we planned together. She called me weekly with updates about the flowers, the dress, the guest list. I was genuinely excited to walk her down the aisle. Everything seemed perfect until about 8 months into the planning. My daughter called me one day and told me they had decided to change things up a bit. When I asked what kind of changes, she explained they wanted to have a destination wedding in Puerto Rico instead of the local venue they had booked. I was a bit surprised but tried to stay positive. I told her that sounded beautiful and that her stepmom would be excited about it since it was her homeland. Then she dropped another bombshell. She said there was one more thing. They were moving the wedding up by a year. It was going to be that fall instead of the following year. That hit me like a truck. Not only was she changing to an expensive destination wedding, but she was giving me a year less to save for it. I asked if she was sure about the timing, mentioning that it was going to be pretty expensive for everyone. She responded by saying it was her dream wedding and that she thought I'd be supportive. What could I say to that? I told her I'd make it work somehow. I started researching flights and accommodations for my family. The costs were adding up fast, but I didn't want to disappoint her. I booked an Airbnb for my wife, stepkids, and myself. I bought plane tickets for everyone. I even helped pay for some extended family members to come because my daughter insisted she wanted everyone there. The total bill was climbing toward $25,000, but I figured it was a once-in-a-lifetime event. Then 2 months before the wedding, everything fell apart. My daughter called me, crying, and told me the wedding was off. I asked what had happened and if she was okay. She explained that they had broken up because he said she was being too controlling about the wedding planning. My heart broke for her, but I also started thinking about all the money I'd already spent. The flights were non-refundable, and the Airbnb had a strict cancellation policy. I asked her what she wanted to do about all the reservations. She said she was actually still going and wanted to have a photo shoot there. She called them revenge photos to show him what he was missing. She wanted to spend $25,000 on a spy trip. I told her that seemed a bit excessive for photos. She said she was heartbroken and needed this for closure. Since my wife's family was from Puerto Rico anyway, and several of them were planning to come, I decided to go ahead with the trip. Maybe it would be good for my daughter to get away and process her feelings. The whole thing cost me $22,500 when all was said and done. The trip was actually nice despite the circumstances. My daughter seemed to enjoy herself and took her photos. I thought maybe this experience would help her mature a bit and think more carefully about big decisions in the future. A few months later, some buddies from work invited me on a motorcycle trip through Glacier National Park. After spending so much money on other people's trips, I figured I deserved a little adventure for myself. We planned it for September and I was really looking forward to it. Then my daughter dropped a bombshell. She moved back in with her ex-boyfriend without telling anyone. Just packed up and left one day. For 4 months, I heard nothing from her. No calls, no texts, nothing. I was worried but also heard that she'd cut me out completely. Last week, she showed up at my house unannounced. I was in the garage working on my motorcycle when she walked in like nothing had happened. She casually greeted me like she hadn't disappeared for months. I asked where she had been and told her we'd been worried sick. She said she was back with him and that the wedding was back on. When I asked when, she told me it was Thursday, September 11th, and that I needed to be there. I stared at her. Not only was she acting like the last 4 months of silence never happened, but she was telling me about a wedding with less than a week's notice. I told her I couldn't make it because I had plans that week. She asked what could be more important than her wedding. I explained that I was going on a trip with my friends to Glacier National Park and that we'd had it planned for months. She asked if I was really going to miss her wedding for some stupid bike trip. I told her I was there for her first wedding. She said there wasn't a first wedding and reminded me that they had broken up. I laughed at the absurdity of it all. I said that wasn't what my bank account showed. That trip to Puerto Rico had cost me over $20,000. She insisted that wasn't a wedding, just a vacation. I reminded her it was a vacation that she had insisted on having for revenge photos that cost me the same amount people spend on actual weddings. She stood there for a moment, clearly not expecting me to bring up the money. She then asked if I was choosing my friends over my own daughter. I told her I was choosing to honor commitments I made after my daughter disappeared for 4 months without explanation. She said she couldn't believe how selfish I was being. With that, she walked out of the garage. 10 minutes later, my phone started buzzing with angry texts from various family members calling me heartless and selfish. Here's the thing that really got me. The next day, I found out from my wife that my daughter had been planning this wedding for weeks. She'd already sent invitations to other people but waited until the last minute to tell me. She knew I'd have conflicts but figured she could guilt me into canceling my plans. I'm not backing down this time. I've supported her through 2 wedding attempts, spent more money than most people make in a year, and put up with being ignored for months. I'm going on my motorcycle trip with my friends, and for once, I'm putting myself first. My wife completely supports my decision. She told me that even her Puerto Rican family thinks my daughter is being ridiculous. When your stepmother's family is taking your side over your own daughter, you know something's wrong. So now I'm apparently the worst father in the world because I won't drop everything for someone who treats me like a personal ATM. But I'm okay with that. Some years ago, I lost both my arms. The recovery was brutal, but I adapted. Got fitted for prosthetic arms that help me do most daily tasks, though they have their limitations. I can't grip things with the same strength as real hands, and reaching high shelves is basically impossible without the right angle and a lot of effort. I work from home doing graphic design now, which is perfect since I've got full control over my workspace setup, but I still need to go out for groceries and errands like everyone else. Usually it's no big deal. Most people are understanding when I explain I can't help with something physical. This particular Tuesday, I was at the grocery store picking up ingredients for dinner. I was in the cereal aisle trying to reach a box of granola from the middle shelf when this woman approached me. She asked me to help her get a box down from the very top shelf where they kept the organic cereals. I looked up and knew there was no way I could safely reach that high and maintain the grip strength needed. I told her I couldn't help her because I have prosthetic arms and can't reach that high safely. Maybe she'd ask someone else or find a store employee. Instead, she stared at my arms with this weird expression. She told me those didn't look like regular prosthetics. I told her they were just standard prosthetic arms and nothing special about them. She said they were way too advanced and looked military grade. I was getting uncomfortable, but I tried to stay polite. I repeated that they were really just regular prosthetics from the VA hospital and excused myself to finish my shopping. I started to walk away, but she stepped in front of my cart. She told me to wait and said she bet those things could extend. She asked what else they could do and if I was recording her right now. I explained again that they were just prosthetic arms that don't do anything special and that I lost my real arms in an accident. She said that's exactly what a spy would say. She said those arms were probably loaded with cameras and weapons because she'd seen movies about this stuff. At this point, other shoppers were starting to stare. I felt my face getting hot with embarrassment. I told her I just wanted to buy my groceries and go home and asked her to move so I could get past. She said no, I wasn't going anywhere. She said she was calling Homeland Security right now. She pulled out her phone and started dialing. I told her this was ridiculous and that I wasn't a spy, just trying to shop. She told me to save it for the authorities. She said these arms were definitely spy equipment and bet they could turn into weapons at any moment. She was talking loud enough that half the store could hear her. A few people had pulled out their phones and were recording. Great, I thought. This is going to end up on social media. I tried to push my cart around her, but she grabbed my arm. Hard. She said I wasn't going anywhere until Homeland Security got there and arrested me. The moment she grabbed my prosthetic, something in me snapped. I had dealt with curious kids, awkward stares, and ignorant comments for 3 years. But this was too much. I told her to let go of me right now. She said, "Not happening, spy boy." She said I was staying right there. She tightened her grip on my prosthetic arm, which actually hurt because of how the attachment connects to my residual limb. I used my other arm to push her away, but she stumbled backward more than I expected. Maybe it was because she was so focused on holding on to me that she wasn't prepared for any resistance. She went down hard, landing on her butt in the middle of the aisle. She screamed that I had attacked her and that the spy had attacked her. She yelled for someone to call the police. By now, a store manager had appeared, along with what looked like half the store's customers. The manager asked what was going on. She told him I was a spy with weapon arms and that I had just assaulted her. The manager asked me if that was true. I said no, absolutely not. I explained I have prosthetic arms because I lost mine in an accident. I told him she grabbed me and wouldn't let go, so I pushed her away. I said I just wanted to buy my groceries. The manager looked between us, clearly trying to figure out what was happening. The manager asked her if she had grabbed me. She said of course she did. She said I was a terrorist spy. She told him to look at those arms. The manager told her he needed her to calm down and that these appeared to be medical prosthetics. She said everyone was in on it and called it a conspiracy. At this point, someone had called the actual police. 2 officers showed up within minutes. The first officer asked what the problem was. She immediately launched into her story about me being a spy with weapon arms. The officer looked at me with what I hoped was sympathy rather than suspicion. The first officer asked me to explain what happened. I told him I was shopping and she asked me to read something from a high shelf. I explained that I told her I couldn't because of my prosthetics. She decided I was a spy and grabbed me when I tried to leave. I said I pushed her away to get free. The second officer asked her if she had physically grabbed me. She said of course she did. She said I was a terrorist spy and pointed at my arms. The first officer asked to see some identification. I handed over my driver's license and my VA medical card that shows my prosthetic prescription. The first officer told her I was a disabled veteran and these were medical prosthetics, not weapons. She said that's what they wanted him to think and that this was obviously a cover story. The officer looked at her like she'd lost her mind. The second officer explained to her that she couldn't physically detain someone because she thought their medical devices looked suspicious, and that was assault. She kept saying I was a spy. The first officer told her she was under arrest for assault and false imprisonment. Watching her get handcuffed while still yelling about spy arms was satisfying. The other customers were recording everything and I could already imagine the Reddit posts about the crazy woman who thought prosthetics were spy weapons. The manager told me he was sorry about this and that my groceries were on the house today. The whole thing took about 2 hours to sort out, I had to give a statement, but the officers were very understanding. The woman had quite a few previous incidents on her record involving harassing people over imaginary threats. I grew up in an Eastern European country where opportunities were limited, not because we lacked talent or dedication, but because we lacked funding. After graduating top of my class from university, I watched my research projects die a slow death due to lack of resources. That's when I decided to apply for an international graduate program in Germany. Against all odds, I got accepted with a full scholarship. The program was conducted entirely in English, which worked perfectly for me since I was already fluent in 3 languages, though German wasn't one of them. I knew I'd need to learn it eventually, so I immediately signed up for German classes and found a conversation partner to practice with once a week. That's where I met Karen. She was a German student who had started the same program at the same time as me, but unlike me, she hadn't received a scholarship initially. From day one, she made it clear that she wasn't happy about having to communicate with me in English instead of German. After about 2 months, Karen decided she was going to help me learn German, whether I wanted it or not. Her method was simple. She stopped speaking to me directly and started having all conversations with our department colleagues exclusively in German, never including me or translating anything. When I asked her why she was doing this, she explained that this was how children learn languages, by hearing people speak around them. I tried to point out that children actually learn when people interact with them in that language, not when they're excluded from conversations, but Karen insisted that I needed to be immersed and that this was the best way. When more German colleagues joined our program, Karen convinced them to follow her approach. Soon I found myself surrounded by people who would only address me in English when absolutely necessary, despite us all being part of the same English language graduate program. But Karen's issues with me went far beyond language. Over the months, she shared her theories about me with anyone who would listen. She told people that I only got into the program because I was a foreigner and they had quotas to fill. When I caught a bad cold that triggered my chronic bronchitis, she spread rumors that it wasn't bronchitis at all but tuberculosis, and that I had probably infected half the lab by now. When I started dating my now husband, a local guy, she told anyone who would listen that I was obviously just using him for a visa and that we shouldn't have children together anyway, because people from different cultures often don't have healthy babies. The most bizarre accusation came when she noticed our menstrual cycles had synced up, which sometimes happens when women spend a lot of time together. She actually accused me of deliberately not taking birth control just to spite her and force our cycles to match. I tried to stay professional and focus on my work. My German was slowly improving and I could understand more of their conversations. Most of the time they weren't even discussing work-related topics. Fast forward a couple of years. I was in the lab one afternoon cleaning equipment for an upcoming experiment. Behind me, an automated instrument we called a spotter was running one of Karen's samples. The machine mixed liquid samples with resin, then used a needle to deposit them onto clean plates for analysis. The whole process took about 2 hours and made a rhythmic sound when the needle moved up, sideways, down, then repeated the cycle. About 20 yards away, Karen was chatting with another lab mate about weekend plans. My German had improved enough that I could tell they were discussing food and family visits. Nothing urgent. Suddenly, the rhythmic sound stopped. I spun around and saw that the needle had jammed halfway between the up and down positions. I'd never seen this happen before, but I knew we had maybe 2 minutes to save Karen's sample before it would be ruined. This wasn't the first time I'd helped save one of her experiments. A year earlier, she had performed surgery on 2 lab mice and then left town for the weekend, completely forgetting about them. I got a panicked phone call from her on Friday evening when she was already 2 hours away, begging me to help her revive the mice that were no longer breathing. I managed to bring one of them back to life that day. So when I saw her sample in danger, my first instinct was to help. I rushed over to where she was standing and started to tell her about the problem with her sample. Karen held up her finger right in front of my face and wagged it. She told me but she was busy right now and couldn't be interrupted. She immediately turned back to our colleague and continued their conversation about her mother's cooking techniques. Something inside me snapped. After years of harassment, exclusion, and bizarre accusations, she couldn't even pause for 5 seconds to save her own experiment. If she's too busy for her own work, then so am I. I quietly walked back to my equipment and continued cleaning. The spotter kept making grinding noises when the needle remained jammed. 15 minutes passed. By then, Karen's sample was completely ruined. Karen finished her conversation about weekend recipes and started walking toward the exit with a satisfied smile on her face. When she passed by, I called out over my shoulder without turning around. I casually mentioned that the spotter had jammed with her sample about 15 minutes ago. The smile vanished from her face instantly, replaced by pure panic. She demanded to know why I hadn't told her earlier. I turned around slowly and gave her the biggest grin I could manage. I reminded her that I had tried to tell her, but she had been too busy to listen. She started ranting about how the sample had taken weeks to prepare and that she needed these results for her thesis. I suggested that she could make more samples since she seemed to have plenty of time for chatting. She rushed to the machine, but it was too late. The sample was completely destroyed, and depending on what she was testing, it could take anywhere from days to weeks to replace. Karen accused me of sabotage and said I had done this on purpose. I simply reminded her that I had tried to help, but she had chosen to prioritize discussing her mother's recipes instead. Word spread quickly through the department about what had happened. But instead of supporting Karen like they had in the past, people started questioning her behavior. They realized that if she couldn't even pause a casual conversation to save her own critical experiment, maybe her complaints about me weren't entirely justified. The incident became a turning point. Karen's harassment campaign, which had initially received support from our colleagues, started backfiring. People began to see her treatment of me for what it really was: unprofessional and mean-spirited. When our program ended, I was offered a permanent position with a raise. Karen was shown the door. Even a year later, when I left for an even better opportunity elsewhere, she was still unemployed and searching for work. I've been teaching for over 20 years now, but this story takes me back to my very first year in 2004. Fresh out of college with my teaching degree, I was excited to start my career as a high school math teacher. Like most new teachers, I got the short end of the stick when it came to classroom assignments. While the veteran teachers got nice rooms in the main building with working air conditioning and proper insulation, I was stuck in what they called a portable classroom. If you've never seen one of these things, imagine a glorified trailer that's supposed to pass for a real classroom. They are meant to be temporary solutions for overcrowding. But let me tell you, there's nothing temporary about how miserable they are. The school district had been using these things for years, and it showed. The real problem started when Florida decided to remind everyone why it's nicknamed the surface of the sun. We don't really have 4 seasons here, just summer and slightly less brutal summer. By May, the heat was already becoming unbearable, and that's when I discovered just how broken our portable's air conditioning system was. A hurricane the previous year had damaged the insulation and nobody had bothered to fix it. The air conditioner was working overtime but couldn't keep up with the heat bleeding through those damaged walls. By 10 in the morning, it was literally hotter inside my classroom than it was outside in the parking lot. My students were sweating through their clothes, and I could barely think straight myself. After watching my kids suffer for 3 days, I made an executive decision. I grabbed some chalk and headed outside to the courtyard. One of my students asked what we were doing outside. I told them we were learning math where we could actually breathe, and had everyone grab their notebooks. For a few days, it was pretty great. The kids loved the change of scenery, and we could actually focus on algebra instead of trying not to pass out from heat stroke. I thought I'd found the perfect solution until one of the assistant principals spotted us. He told me he needed to see me after class. That afternoon, I walked into his office, still sweating from teaching in that portable oven. He asked why I was teaching outside that day. I explained that the air conditioning in the portable couldn't keep up, that it was dangerous in there, and that the kids couldn't learn when they were overheating. He told me he didn't care and that I needed to teach in my classroom. I tried to negotiate. I asked if I could give the front office my cell phone number in case of emergencies, or maybe use the media center instead. He cut me off and said I would teach in my assigned classroom, and that was final. The way he said it, like I was some kind of troublemaker, really got under my skin. But I just nodded and walked out saying that I'd show him what teaching in my assigned classroom looked like. That weekend, I decided to get creative. I drove to the home improvement store and spent my own money on supplies. I bought a 50-gallon trash can, a big standing fan, a small water pump, and some copper tubing. It took me most of Saturday to figure out how to rig it all together, but I managed to create a makeshift swamp cooler. The pump would circulate ice water through the copper tubing that I zip-tied to the front of the fan, cooling the air as it blew into the room. Monday morning, I showed up to work early and sweet-talked the cafeteria ladies into letting me fill a few coolers with ice. I dumped it all into my trash can contraption, filled it with water, plugged everything in, and waited. When my first period students walked in, their faces lit up. One of them said it was actually cool in here and asked how I did it. I told them it was just basic thermodynamics, nothing fancy. Another student asked if I was like a mad scientist or something. I laughed and said no. I was just a teacher who got tired of watching them all melt. Word spread fast. By third period, students were coming in talking about the cool math teacher was a crazy ice machine. I had to keep explaining that it wasn't magic, just simple physics. The pump circulated cold water through the coils. The fan blew air over them, and cooler air came out. Not as good as real air conditioning, but good enough that we could actually function. For a week and a half, everything was great. The kids were learning, nobody was overheating, and I was feeling pretty proud of my ingenuity. Then I got the call. The secretary told me the principal wanted to see me in her office immediately. I walked in to find Karen, our principal, looking absolutely furious. She demanded to know why she was getting phone calls from parents asking about some science experiment in my math class. I explained that it wasn't a science experiment but a homemade air conditioner. I reminded her that I had told the assistant principal our unit wasn't working properly, and when he refused to address the situation, I fixed it myself. She yelled that I had made this school look incompetent and that parents were asking why their children's teacher had to build his own air conditioning. I suggested that maybe it was because their children's classroom didn't actually have working air conditioning. She told me I would disassemble that thing immediately and that this kind of behavior wouldn't be tolerated. The next day, I came in to find maintenance installing a brand new air conditioning unit in my portable. Funny how quickly they could fix things when parents started asking questions. But Karen wasn't done with me. At the end of the school year, she called me in again. She told me that they had decided not to renew my contract for next year. I asked if it was because I made sure my students could learn in a safe environment. She said it was because I made the administration look bad, and they couldn't have teachers going rogue and embarrassing the school. I told her that maybe someone actually solving a problem around here wasn't such a bad thing. I had to find a new school for my second year of teaching. It was stressful and humiliating, but I landed on my feet at a better school with administrators who actually cared about education. The really satisfying part of this story comes 20 years later. My son is now a student at that same high school, and guess what? Those same portable classrooms are still there, still being used, still making students and teachers miserable every summer. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.